4.5 billion years ago from various solar material to eventually create a very remarkable biosphere which has seen life grow from the smallest to the biggest and the smartest life as we, the human race, have ever known. This blue marble, as seen from the void of space, is as beautiful off the planet as it is on it. But life on the planet is not as picturesque as our cameras may portray. Every day is a struggle, and life must end for other lives to continue. However, there have been occasions in Mother Earth's history, instead of nurturing her offspring and cultivating their development, she chose to murder her children en masse. It's estimated that 5 planet-wide extinction events have already occurred. The first was 444 million years ago, which seen 86% of all species alive on the planet wiped out, probably triggered by the uplift of the Appalachian mountain range now in the USA, sucking huge amounts of CO2 from the atmosphere due to the exposed silicate rock, which sent the planet into a short but severe ice age. The second was 375 million years ago, which saw the loss of 75% of the planet's species, probably caused by the rise of land from the oceans, promoting algae blooms which sucked oxygen from the water. The third, 250 million years ago, nearly sterilized the planet. 96% of all life died according to the textbooks, due mostly to a cataclysmic eruption near Siberia. Huge amounts of greenhouse gases rose the planet's temperature and acidified the oceans. The fourth occurred 200 million years ago, where we find evidence of serpentine creatures on the planet with no jaws, but mouths and throats filled with remarkable teeth. One such creature was found in 1980 in Scotland called a conodont, but no cause was ever found for their extinction. The fifth we are mostly all familiar with, and happened 66 million years ago, resulting in 76% of life on the planet being wiped out during the age of the great lizards. An asteroid impact in the Gulf of Mexico was the final nail in the coffin for the dinosaurs, who were already suffering from volcanic aftermath and climate change. Over the last 300,000 years, humans have been climbing the proverbial tree of the dominant species to make an impact on this planet. But 2 areas of the Earth have avoided our direct interference due to their harshness. Our technology has helped us explore both above and below the surface of the Earth, tapping into resources which have been deemed useful to growing and developing nations and those wishing to remain dominant. The Arctic to the north has its pole centralized on open ocean, which it is significantly smaller than its sister, the Antarctic, to the south. The Antarctic pole is focused on a landmass which delivers a very different and killer weather system, which can freeze exposed skin in seconds. Exceptionally powerful currents surround this icy continent, which separates it from the warmer waters of the Pacific, Indian and Atlantic Oceans. Due to the South Pole being on land, it is found over 9,000 feet above sea level on the surface of the icy giant, where temperatures never rise above minus 12 degrees Celsius or 9 degrees Fahrenheit. The vast mountains are protected by the massive ice sheets, some several miles deep. Deadly katabatic winds that blow off the high plains, thousands of feet above sea level, filter into the valleys below and have reached speeds of 320 kilometers an hour or 200 miles per hour. And when combined with the lowest temperatures recorded on the planet at minus 94 degrees Celsius or minus 135 degrees Fahrenheit, this creates a deadly and highly efficient killing machine. Among all the dreadful possibilities the weather can inflict on the human body, life does strangely survive down there. Seals, penguins, whales and squid, to name a few, live in the white world quite comfortably. Small pockets of exposed land heated by thermal activity are sporadically found across the continent. Remarkably, on only 1% of the land that remains ice-free, there are two species of flowering plants, the Antarctic hairgrass and the Antarctic pearlwort can be found. The Antarctic Treaty was signed in the United States on December 1st, 1959 by 12 countries whose scientists had been stationed on the continent during the International Geophysical Year on 1957 to 1958. The treaty was enforced in 1961, with other countries adding their support, bringing it to a total of 53 world nations now supporting and recognising the need to protect this vulnerable environment and making it one of the largest protected areas in the world at over 1 million square kilometres. At least that's the sentiment sold to us on a global scale. But what if this was not the case? What if the treaty is being held together by a thread as big players force their way into the world arena as they begin to understand the considerable amount of natural resources that lie dormant under the ice? Land and sea seizures have already taken place this century as large nations fight and struggle behind a thinning veil of media coverage to keep our questioning minds looking in another direction. What resources are available that would drive a big player to break the agreement? The ice and snow of the Antarctic seems to produce an exceptionally fruitful crop of conspiracy theories, including large pyramids, frozen civilizations, current and active alien and Nazi bases, monsters under the ice, and missing expeditions. The continent's appearance within the world stage is just as shady. There are those that suggest that the great land to the south was known before its sighting by mariners in the 1820s. Its very name, Antarctic, is a term coined by Marinus of Tyre from Syria in the 2nd century AD. Although he never saw the land, or even the ice for that matter, he used the understanding that the earth must be in balance, and if there is land in the north, then the equal must be said to the south. By the 15th century, the Great Lands began appearing again in maps known as Terra Australis, Latin for Southlands. By 1513, a Turkish mapmaker and admiral, Ahmed Muhaddin Peri, produced a map based on alleged ancient maps. Some have assumed it outlined the Antarctic coastline and the Americas. The details within the map, known today as Peri-Reis, are very detailed, but the map vanished and was only rediscovered in 1929. On examination, the midsection of the map was very accurate and seemed to resemble the central worldview perspective typical for that time period. However, the devil is in the detail, and here the map lets us down. Other sources have claimed that the Peri-Reis map also accurately depicts the unfrozen shoreline of the Antarctic, which has been under ice for millions of years. This is not the case. You can see the overlay of the Peri-Reis map in pink against how we know the Earth is today, and we can see the North America section is not represented properly, and the reliability of the South America section drops away significantly. With the destruction of the Peri-Reis map put behind us, we can now start to move on to more modern mysteries. Before the Antarctic Treaty was signed, the military establishment had already moved in. In 1928, Admiral Byrd had started the first of many expeditions to the polar region, culminating in the first of Operation Deep Freeze, which today we are led to believe is an ongoing defence support to civilian authorities in Antarctica. Defensive support, you say? From what? A possible attack from pesky and cunning penguins? Following the Operation Deep Freeze in 1955, Other countries began utilising the pockets of ice-free zones in the region, building bases designed to be more long-term. Admiral Byrd's now infamous expedition to the Antarctic, called Operation High Jump, ended some 6 months early due to worsening weather conditions, and consisted of 4,700 men, 13 ships, and 33 aircraft. Byrd was alleged to have made a series of cryptic comments during an interview with news correspondent Lee Van Atta aboard the USS Mount Olympus, which later appeared in a Chilean newspaper called El Mercurio. Admiral Byrd declared today that it was an imperative for the United States to initiate immediate defense measures against hostile regions. The Admiral further stated that he didn't want to frighten anyone unduly, but that it was a bitter reality that in case of a new war, the continental United States would be attacked by flying objects, which could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. Admiral Byrd repeated the above points of view, resulting from his personal knowledge gathered both at North and South Poles, before a news conference held for International News Service. It seems that there may have been something lost in translation between English and Spanish, as the original article reads, Byrd warns US to guard against enemy attacks from polar regions. Aboard USS Mount Olympus en route home from Antarctica, March the 5th, Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd warned today that the United States must guard against any future invasions by hostile aircraft from across the polar regions of the Earth. It seems the Admiral's aspirations at establishing a new base in Antarctica at a time of increasing Soviet distrust became embroiled with a fictional book released years later called The Hollow Earth, the greatest geographical discovery in history made by Admiral Richard E. Byrd in the mysterious land beyond the poles. A book written by Walter Siegmeister. A lot of the fictional storylines from this book and others just like it have led to a cloud of thick conspiracy when there really was none. Well, at least as far as aliens went anyway in 1947. Rather, it was about getting a foothold in the best parts of the Antarctic region before other nations began developing it. It was understood early on during the military and scientific expeditions that the electromagnetic variations at the poles could affect global weather conditions. It has been claimed the original Kemp Sky High on the Antarctic Peninsula was used to stimulate aurora effects. Harry Wexler was chief scientist to the United States Antarctic team in 1958, before the treaty was signed a year later. He allegedly detailed a study to alter planetary-scale weather manipulation using short and long-term radiation, and proposed induction of worldwide planet change called The Possibility of Climate Control, released in 1962. Experiments carried out in the Antarctic region bombarded part of the atmosphere with chlorine and bromine, which destroyed part of the boundary layer of ozone. This natural planetary safety barrier acts as a filter for the shorter wavelength and highly hazardous ultraviolet radiation from the sun, protecting life on Earth from its potentially harmful effects. It was also alleged in early August 1963 a nuclear weapons launch was made from the Antarctic, probably designed to enhance radio propagation in the stratosphere, allowing global radio signal transfer around the planet, whereas today we use the more modern and reliable satellite technology. Surely details such as these are what drives the story surrounding the icy continent. Strangely, if we examine the idea of heating the planet and the decade in which those experiments were said to have been carried out, we find a correlation between the experiments and a sharp rise thereafter of the planet's temperature. Throw in the idea that we are left with a hole in the ozone layer, And we are left wondering what actually did go on down there, and how the children are left to pay for the sins of the parents. So far in this documentary, we have been trying to maneuver our way through the truth and misdirection, but the Antarctic is not without its true mysteries. It seems UFOs have been reported in the Antarctic since our serious involvement with the continent. A Freedom of Information request disclosed reported sightings at least since the 5th of July 1965. A group of red, green and yellow UFOs have been seen flying over Deception Island for 2 hours. It seems Argentinian, Chilean and British bases reported these flying lights over their bases and were also reported flying in tight circles over the South Orkney Islands. Reports of strange lights are nothing new for the Antarctic continent, but there is a divisive element within superior authorities serving on the continent to keep those reports quiet. During the summer season of 1995 to 1996, a member of a US military flight crew claimed on at least 2 separate flights to have witnessed silver disc-shaped objects hovering and performing flight maneuvers over the Transantarctic mountain range, a series of peaks that splits the continent from east to west. There are a series of magnetic anomalies surrounding the continent, with one being concentrated on the edge of the Badakhshan Mountains, and this one in particular, where the anomalies would most likely appear within the Transantarctic range. These anomalies are also littered around the planet, and through steady research it has shown the Badakhshan anomaly in particular would be the most likely location of the sightings, and like with other strange anomalies, would also possess unusual phenomena including UFO sightings and abductions. Stronger anomalies are also found along the western edges of the continent, with one extending from the Walker Mountains to Davis Coast and the East Base Research Station, and another stretching from the Walgreen Coast southeast toward the South Pole. These anomalies are found in other locations around the planet, such as Skinwalker Ranch and the Brown Mountain Lights in the United States, Hisdalen Lights in Norway, and the famous A70 abduction case in Scotland in 1982, for example. Missing people in such harsh conditions would be more common if more people could afford the $78,000 round-trip ticket, but as it is, we just have a scattering of reports leaking from those stationed there. During the 1994 to 1995 summer, a group of scientists were alleged to have vanished, but finding any information on people who may have gone missing or died on the continent is exceptionally difficult. However, we do know of a strange case of Carl Robert Deitch in 1965. He was an ionospheric physicist who vanished whilst working at the Baird Research Station. Carl left the radio noise building at 9:15 a.m. on the morning of the 8th of May 1965. He was heading for the main station complex to the south. The buildings were linked throughout the complex by a hand line to provide guidance during whiteout storms. By 11:30 a.m., a search was initiated and the trail was found leading west for about 4 miles. One report suggested there was no noticeable lessening of his stride, and eventually the search was called off on May the 14th. No sight or sound of Carl was ever found since. Was this just a case of losing his way within the snow? He did have a handrail to guide him, but he obviously didn't use it. There have been other unsubstantiated reports that strange lights were also seen in the area of his disappearance, and a strange hum similar to those heard all over the planet, like a diesel generator in the distance. And shortly after his disappearance, his own husky Gus also vanished without a trace. The old Baird station was constructed in the middle of the Walgreen anomaly, but due to the nature of secrecy pertaining to experimental programs being conducted down there, any further details are not forthcoming. In the Antarctic summer season of 2002 to 2003, a story was blasted onto the internet through an Australian website. The world was amazed to learn of the disappearance of a Californian television crew who went missing in the Antarctic tundra. The breaking story stated the crew were investigating archaeological remains which had been discovered of a former major complex of ancient structures. It seems during the live broadcast the entire crew were attacked by some unknown assailants and the live feed was cut.